Welcome to the Look Good, Move Well podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Look Good, Move Well podcast. What has it been, 7 weeks since we've recorded something?
Yeah, it's been a while. I'm so excited that we're back.
Me too. Yeah, I'm happy to be diving into some new topics, some topics that, as per usual, we've gotten from our listeners, and always a good time to remind you all that are listening that getting your questions to us is as simple as sliding into our DMs on Instagram. Satya Khan, Marcus Philly, send us ideas that you have about podcast topics that would really help you. I got a couple good ones today, and sometimes I'll get topic ideas from y'all that we've actually filmed before. So it's easy for me to just kind of point you to that old podcast. But today somebody was asking about, training when they're sick, or what do you do when you get sick? I know we've done that episode in the past. Maybe we'll come back to it again because it's August, and that means September, October, November, right around the corner when everyone gets sick. Kids are going back to school.
Oh man, get ready.
Boy.
Yeah.
So anyhow, to get things started today, anything you'd like to just banter about a little bit today, Satya?
Ooh, banter topic. Yeah. Well, what was the thing that you were most excited about when you got back home?
I actually was pretty detached from good coffee for about 4 or 5 weeks. So I traveled on the East Coast with my family. We were in Airbnbs. We were, none of the places that we stayed had a good coffee setup. And I was okay with that. I'm not so coffee snobby that I'm
You're not so precious.
No. There was actually, which made me very appreciative whenever a good cup of coffee would come around. We were staying in a very small little lake town in Maine, way up in the north of the state, at a place called Rangeley Lake. And this little small town in Rangeley had this beautiful coffee shop. It was this co-working space / coffee shop. They had clearly just built this building just for this purpose. Everything was designed and spec'd out for a coffee shop, co-working space. I got to meet the owners. They're actually they live part-time here in the Bay Area. They live on the peninsula, and then they also live half the year there. And they were super cool, had all these cool touches. You would have loved a lot of the artistic touches in here, but the coolest thing about this coffee shop was that you walk down the hallway and the bathroom's on the left, and then the staff room is on the left, which is also another bathroom for them. And then there's a whole bookshelf on the right. That's beautiful. Really curated, cool book moments and things like that. And then I'm looking at the bookshelf, and it freaking opened, and he came out of the room, and I was like,
no
what?
way.
He's like, oh yeah, this is the
secret
this
entrance.
Is my secret entrance. I was like, this is wild.
That's cool.
But so yeah, we got home and got back to good coffee and making espresso, and anyway, that was what I missed the most.
Yeah.
And what was the coolest thing that happened here while I was gone?
Not a lot happened here. It was so quiet. But I think the coolest thing was that we had a break from our really intense, grueling content routine, which we all love to do. And we just met a moment ago about getting back into it. And I'm excited for that. But it definitely takes a lot of energy. So it was nice to have a little bit more space to really put my mind to some other projects. And I feel move the business forward. And
for sure.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Yeah.
We love making content for you all. And, something I learned along the way was you can be so in the, and this is true for anything, but, creating content, being creative, that is the essence of the whole platforms. It's being creative. But when you are making it so regularly, and then you're trying to adapt your content to the platforms and to what people are wanting to see, and over time it can kind of slowly morph into almost you lose the creative process, and it's not, you're doing content, you're not creating content. And that was something that kind of felt really important coming back, was okay, how do we get back to being truly creative with our process, you know,
Yeah.
and really thinking about it, because that's what ultimately resonates the most with people and helps the most people, not like, you know, what, just doing, right?
Yeah.
So this was like a great lesson for, I think, all of us to just step out of our normal routine and not just dive right back into it, but like, okay, we're going to think critically
intentional.
about, be intentional about it. And I cannot stop looking at your white Whoop band. It's so fresh and so clean.
Yeah.
And mine is so
Was yours white?
tired.
It's gray.
No. This was supposed to be blue. This is blue. But I was wearing my yellow one the last like couple weeks, and it's looking a little brown. So, okay.
Okay.
Well, today we're going to be talking about a concept called fit shaming.
Yeah.
And you know, it came across my feed recently. I've been following, you know, a creator called Meadow henselman's for quite some time, and he's, if I was gonna describe his platform, you know, he's an evidence-based nutrition and, you know, physique bodybuilding strength coach. Does a lot of reviews of the current literature that's out there, is I think helps to take the scientific literature and turn it into like digestible, easier to understand reviews and themes for people, pulling out the most relevant nuggets that make an actual impact in your training or in your nutrition. He also has a book published about that goes into like the science, practical, and emotional applications around really making good dietary changes and establishing good nutritional habits. Anyway, he's a wealth of knowledge. If you don't follow him, I would encourage you to go and give him a follow on all the platforms, but Instagram and YouTube, where he's really active. Maybe we can link that in the show notes. I just want to be a creator who gives credit to other creators who inspire me.
Hell yeah.
Anyway, he wrote about fit shaming or had an Instagram post about fit shaming. I don't know if he did a long form piece on this. Actually, I think he did. But essentially it's, and I've encountered this so much in my life, and I've had my own journey with it over 20 years.
Yeah.
Where I don't know, whatever the term brings up for you, like shaming, fit shaming. Essentially, the way I've encountered it in my life is that when you're on the path of health and wellness, fitness, you're committed to healthy behaviors or fitness behaviors, or that really can feel like it can trigger people around you, or it can make people that are not on the same path as you, it can bring up feelings, and those feelings can then get projected back at you in a way where that person doesn't feel comfortable with you making your healthy behavior because maybe they're not there yet, or they see what you're doing as just fringe and so different and so over the top, and they like to label you as like a fitness fanatic, or you know, something as simple as like, oh, you're not drinking tonight? What's wrong with you? Like, how come you're not like, just have a drink with us, right? And your choice is like, no, I'm not drinking, or like, I'm not a drinker, or, you know, I don't like to drink alcohol. It doesn't make me feel good, or I'm on a training program and I try to abstain from alcohol for a period of time. And you can imagine this in so many different settings where it's like, just have a piece of cake. Like, come on,
Right.
it's your kid's birthday, or it's, you know, it's a birthday, like have the cake. And it's like, or you're eating at a restaurant and you are like, you feel like you want to make some choices about the menu. You're asking for some substitutions, and maybe the waitress or the waiter is maybe giving you a hard time, like you can't make those changes. Or I think that was like his example was, you know, he was having like a celebratory dinner with his girlfriend for an anniversary or her birthday, and they went to a nice restaurant, and he was like, look, I'm all for indulging, but I kind of like, I draw the line at like fried foods. I just don't eat fried foods because trans fats for me are just like a no-go territory. So I had made a request that we do no fried foods, and they, like, the chef was kind of trying to like basically convince me like, well, it's only a little bit of fried something. And he's like, just no, I'm just not into it, you know? But it can go in a lot of different ways for people. And I think today it's like, I want to dive into how do you deal with that? Like, what are some ways to approach it? And, you know, what does it bring up for you? What does it mean about the person that's actually shaming you, fit shaming you? And, you know, is it your own stuff? And like I said, I've been through this whole journey of it where I'm like, at times it's made me feel like people are trying to sabotage me and nobody is supportive of me. And then I've had times where I've, you know, so that was like my anger stage. And then there's been times where I've like detached. And then there's been times where I've tried to like positively influence people, or I've gotten to a state where like I'm confident in my own choices that it's now, it now can be a positive influence on others. And he had a framework which was like, you know, you can either follow people, you can detach, or you can lead them. And I like that framework. I like those words because that's been consistent with different phases of my 20-year journey of it. And I keep using the word, like the number 20, because if you go back 20 years, I was like 16, 17, 18 years old. And I'm like really getting into training nutrition and doing things that did not align with the people I was around. Like, I was on a diet in college where people were like, what the hell? Like, I'm eating at like, you know, Top Dog 3 times a day. Like this is not, why are you eating, you know, cottage cheese with like protein powder and yogurt mixed together? Funny. Like, my best friend Ben is like, I met him at that stage of my life, and he was like, you know, we're meeting up for like study groups to like study for the MCAT. And he's like, literally got like chopped up hot dogs and like something else in like a little baggie, and I'm like eating this like that he like brought down from like the frat house that he was staying at or whatever, and I'm like over here like eating this like well concocted like macro protein thing, and he's like, what the hell is that? I was like, you know, it's my thing. So that was a long-winded intro, but Satya, where have I missed a segment of this conversation that you think is really applicable to our audience?
Yeah. Well, the thing that immediately starts coming to mind for me is there's a huge difference between behavior that you engage in that impacts 0 people. Like, I'm just packing my lunch for the day. It has no bearing on what anyone else is doing. It's me and my food and the way that I choose to approach it, or me and my training schedule and the way that I choose to approach that, versus when relationships with other people come into play. And I think that that's when fit shaming really starts to happen. And it can go in so many different ways, because some people, like you said, are having things brought up in them from watching your behavior that they react to. They either, you know, feel, you know, concern troll for you. I call it concern troll because it's not always necessarily coming from a healthy place, but sometimes it is valid concern. People are concerned that you may be engaging in self-destructive behaviors. And so I feel like there's a whole layer of relationship and looking at, first and foremost, what is needed in the connection between you and that other person. Like, is it that they're trying to have a family moment and the cake is symbolic of something really special? And you shutting that off for your fitness is creating a barrier to that, you know, relationship. So there's just so many examples of that, but just want to name the interplay of the people as a really crucial element in all of this.
Certainly. Yeah. I mean, and I think another layer to this is, I don't want people who are engaged in a fit lifestyle, our followers, myself, I've felt this way, to feel like the only way I can engage in my fitness lifestyle and I can stay consistent with what I want to do is to isolate myself from everybody who might, fit shame me or not be in congruence with what I'm trying to do, which is like, if you look at the fitness influencers or bodybuilders or people in those types of, physique driven sports, it's like they tend not to socialize. They tend not to go out to dinner. They tend to not do these things because it's like, okay, I'm just going to avoid any scenario where I'm going to have to like justify my actions or justify my choices. And that's like a coping mechanism. It's a strategy. It's a tool, but it can also be quite destructive for those individuals where it's like, okay, you've just removed this whole relational part of your life and potentially something that could feel really rewarding because it's easier to do it this other way, like where every day you're just packing your own lunch and you're eating your own lunch and you're in a room by yourself and then you have to worry about it. And look, I have to be intentional about that too. Like maybe it's like 80% of my meals I end up eating by myself and matter of convenience, but also like it just is it's also easier because there's not a lot of like, okay, I gotta tell somebody why I'm I'm gonna skip the plate of ribs that have like a sugary sauce all over them and I'm just gonna eat some of like the plain grilled chicken that was on the barbecue too. And I did this a lot when I was on my trip. Like I wasn't going to not have family dinners with, our cousins and my in-laws. And, every night was like, okay, we're going to make a meal that everyone's going to eat. And I'm going to sit down with, the whole like, okay, how am I going to navigate this and stay congruent and in alignment with what I want to be doing? So that can be a big, like, a big obstacle. And the easiest path a lot of times is to just like, I'm just going to avoid it and not engage in the social thing or the eating out. And that's going to be my solution to this, not wanting to engage in this whole fit shaming or like having to justify what I'm doing.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is complicated about it is that in certain situations, like if someone has a past history with alcohol and now they're abstaining, that is very clear cut in a social context. Like you said, it's like, I don't drink, great, understood. And not to say that people don't put pressure on other people to drink anyway, that does still happen, but I think it's more generally acceptable. Similar kind of thing with, I have celiac, okay? Can't eat that, I'll get sick, great.
Yep.
But when it's this gray area where it's like, well, if you eat the ribs, it's not going to do anything bad. And so where are we conflicting here? That I think that can be really tricky for fit people to navigate.
And that's sort of one of the things I had hoped to kind of bring up today, which is, you are somewhat like, I'm not saying you need to fabricate a story about your choices.
Yeah.
And however, making a choice and being committed to not drinking alcohol for a period of time that you're trying to engage in healthy behavior, or generally just saying like, I don't drink because it doesn't make me feel good, versus like, I am a recovering alcoholic and that is completely off the table for me because the moment I drink, I go down a destructive path. If you, depending on how you frame it to somebody else, it invites the grayness.
Yes.
And something I've heard recently from, a number of people in this movement towards like sort of really being critical of like alcohol consumption in general for just like even a non-recovering, population, people who are just like, alcohol is not working for me anymore. The way you bring it up with your friends can totally change the dynamic of how they engage with you. It's like, if you're somebody who likes to say like, yeah, I'm not drinking tonight. Well, then that means you might drink another night. And that means that, why aren't you drinking tonight? Like if is hanging out with me in this bar or this social setting, like not worth it to you? Like what night is going to be worth it to you. Like, and then that starts to make the person that you're with feel like you're making a judgment of them, or that you're sort of ranking them and they're not high enough priority to like have a drink with.
Yeah.
So changing the language around it, saying like, hey, I'm not drinking tonight, or versus like, yeah, I don't drink. I don't drink. Like I don't drink. And then they can inquire further and you might give another reason, but oftentimes that can just, kill the conversation or shut that conversation down. And they're like, oh, you don't drink? Okay, well, let's talk about something else, you know?
Yeah.
But so much of it is in how you carry yourself into the conversation.
Yes.
It's like, my early days of this, and I remember my brother gave me one of the best pieces of advice, because I was like really struggling with this in my late teenage years, my early 20s. I was like on the early side of my journey in health and fitness and being aligned with these choices, where I felt like I was just getting constantly pressured into eating off of like my diet, or and my brother, I felt at times, was like sort of a culprit of that. Like he would kind of poke at me, and eventually he was like, look, Mark, which he called me Mark. He's like, you're the one, like, it's like your insecurity about all this is like inviting people to like try and poke at you. Like you clearly get rattled anytime someone says something like this. And that's what like people feed off of. Like I don't no, I'm trying not to have the thing. Like don't offer that to me. Or like, why did you have this in the house? Like, I don't want to eat this thing. It's in the house. It's like, oh, what's going on over there? Like, I see you're a little vulnerable to this influence, and this is what I'm choosing to do, or this is how I'm living. Like, I feel like it's pretty normal. Like, hey, let me get you on board with what I'm doing. He's like, if you just don't react to them, and you just like kind of, don't make a big deal out of it, they're going to lose interest, and they're not going to like pressure you into trying to, eat the food or engage in the behavior that you're trying to avoid. And this was like the big shift from like, okay, I'm just going to like follow suit in most instances where people are like questioning what I'm doing. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm cool. I can do what you're doing. Like, don't look at me and don't judge me, to like moving into like a big detachment phase where I was like, no, I'm not interested. Like, and then just detached completely from the feelings and the emotions of it. And it's like, these are my choices. And I don't think that's the best. Like, that's not the, if we're going to evolve, it's like, you might be in a, man, I feel like when I go out with friends, I'm just going to do what they do so that I just don't create this tension. And then maybe you evolve to the point where you're like, no, I'm going to stick to what I'm doing. I'm just going to completely detach. They're going to say something to me. I'm not going to give it any energy. I'm not even going to address it. I'm not even going to respond. I'm going to kind of be like this, like cold-faced, cold-hearted, like
gray rock.
Yeah. And that is absolutely a way to kind of shut it down. Does it foster good relationships? Maybe not. But at least it protects you from like their onslaught of pressure.
Yeah.
And that worked for me for a period of time. It really did. It was like a huge relief of like, oh, the reason I'm feeling so much pressure, the reason I'm getting so much fit shaming is because I'm not so secure in what I'm doing, and I haven't established good enough routines to feel confident in what I'm doing. And I care a lot about what people think about me, and I don't like going against the tide. So like, I'm just kind of caving in, or just like going with the flow of what other people are doing. I'm sort of just following suit. Like, all right, I'll just 80% of the time do my thing. And then the other 20% of the time I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm just eating the whatever. It's like my first date with Megan. We went to like, the food trucks, and I didn't know Megan that well. And I was leading a really healthy lifestyle. I was doing all the things, but we went to the food trucks and we ordered something from a menu. I wasn't sure what it was, and it came, and it was like a sandwich, and I wasn't wanting to eat bread at the time. Like, that was but I'm like, I don't know her like that well. Like, we just met. Like, shoot, like,
Am I going to be the weird guy
I'm not going to be the weird guy. I'm just going to go with the flow. Like, I'm here with this girl. She seems super cool. Like, I'll just eat the sandwich. And I just started eating the sandwich. And then she took the bread, threw it out, ate the rest of the sandwich. Like, I'm not saying one is right or wrong, but I was like, oh my gosh, like, she's confident in what she's doing. She's not doing that. Like, it makes her feel bad. And so I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. Like, I just followed along with what I thought the social norm was here, but maybe it wasn't. I didn't get a chance to fully read the room.
Yeah. Well, I think that note about really being secure of what you're doing is really important. And I think there's something that goes hand in hand with that, which is being aware of your intentions about your own actions and also your biases. And there was something that happened on social media pretty recently with one of the posts that we did around I'm a fit dad trying to get my kids to eat better. And there was a shot of you preparing food for them, preparing food in the kitchen. There was a shot where you weighed a banana on a scale. And someone commented and they were like, oh, is this what you want to be modeling for your kids, of being obsessed about every calorie that they eat? And it was like, wow, like, what does it mean that your reaction to seeing someone weigh food, which is just a unit of measurement, is assigning meaning to it that assumes that anyone who weighs their food is obsessed about not eating too much, rather than, oh, this is a tool for me to understand the different components of food, or it's a tool for me to make sure I eat enough,
Yeah.
And so I just thought it was really interesting to just take in, okay, what are our own biases, both about what we're doing, what we see other people doing, what we assume people think about us. And I feel like getting those out in the open can also help that relationship aspect. It's like, hey, like, is there something about what I'm doing that makes you uncomfortable right now? Or like, Can we talk about this? If that's an ongoing issue, not that you have to have that conversation at every single party, but like,
For
if it's your family or,
Well, and that's the third phase of this, which is like, maybe you're following along and you're like, okay, I'm just going to do what's socially acceptable. Which, by the way, I've seen there's a theme and a repeating content theme that is showing up a lot lately, which is like, I eat 50 grams of protein at a meal, and people, yell at me for like, you're gonna
bad for your kidneys.
Bad for your kidneys. You can't absorb all that. Blah blah. Like they want to say a bunch of stuff, yet somebody sits down and eats like an entire meal of fast food. And it's just like, yeah, that's just normal. Like, you just went to McDonald's and got like a meal, like whatever. It's like no one's going to say anything about eating a fast food meal. But the second I have 50 grams of protein on my plate, or I talk about having 50 grams of protein on my plate, they freak out like, oh, it's anyway. So there's that. We evolved to the point where we're like, okay, maybe I can just detach, and I'm just going to detach from this thing, and I'm not going to let this bother me. Like, that person, they say like, oh my God, you're gonna, measure this banana in front of your kids. Like,
right.
At one stage I'd be like, yeah, like that triggered me. Like, oh, well, like I gotta either get up there and defend myself and like make a big thing, or I can just like totally detach, or it's an opportunity to like lead and teach people and be like, or get to know what's going on for them. Like, oh, what does that bring up for you? Like, how's that? Yeah. Like, what is the trigger there for the person? And certainly they expressed what that trigger was. It's like, do you want your kids to be obsessed with food? I'm like, ask the question. Marcus, do you want your kids to be obsessed with food? No, absolutely not. Is that like a big thing in our family? Like, we discuss and we are talking about? Yeah, it is. Like, I want my kids to have a great relationship with food. I want them to feel they have the ability to decide how much food they get to have and what they get to have within some, guardrails. And has weighing food ever been discussed with them? Absolutely not. That's a choice that I made as an adult to say, I'm going to start doing this. as a tool. And if and when the time ever comes in their life later on where they want to start doing that, they ask the question or they get curious, like, I'll have a conversation with them, but it is not a focal point, of our family and our life. We bake with them. We measure ingredients that go into the muffin recipe. It's like, hey, we need to have this much of this thing. Can you guys count the 100 we need 100 grams of flour. We need 50 grams of sugar. Can you guys count that? Like could you add a little bit more? And it's a kitchen tool that's around the house, but it's not part of building their lunch to go to school or anything like that. Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering if there's a note of, defensiveness around the weighing food issue for you.
I mean, I think in that context, I think with anything that we put out on social media, it's like we're trying to share a message, and there's always tons of context or things behind the scenes that you can't represent in a post. Yeah. And I think hearing that, I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like if you're a parent and you have concerns about your children, like growing up in an environment or creating a relationship with food that's like toxic, then I might ask the same question.
Yeah. Well, I know you've had a really long journey of engaging in fitness behaviors that impact social relationships in a lot of different ways. Times when there have been more difficult interactions for you, times when you've just been, hey, this is what I'm doing. Now times when you've been wanting to lead more and educate people more. What do you suggest is helpful for people who might not have the reps under their belt to just be like, yeah, I'm really solid in what I'm doing and I know exactly why? People who are just trying to, go against the tide of what maybe everybody else around them is eating for lunch or doing with their fitness routine.
Well, it's, I'm not sure that this is like an actionable tip. I think what I'm going to say right now is, that as it relates to, I think with the passage of time, healthy behaviors, both nutritionally, lifestyle, sleep, alcohol related, training, food, etc., are becoming more normalized. Like, oh, you count macros. Like 20 years ago, nobody knew what the hell that meant. If you were counting macros, if you had a spreadsheet, if you had a meal plan, you were a weirdo. Now, I mean, I'm not saying that people won't be like, oh, that's a little weird, but it's at least a term that a lot more people understand, and they recognize it's a tool to help somebody achieve a better relationship with their food and their goals and maybe their body composition, weight loss, something like that. So that will continue to get more normalized over time, which might make this whole journey easier for people and not have to feel so rock solid in their choices because now it's more acceptable.
Yeah.
But I do believe it's a long time away and probably never going to be the case that the average or the acceptable normal lifestyle behaviors, nutritional movement are ever going to yield a exceptionally fit, very healthy, top % health body.
Yeah.
So if you ever desire to be in the top % of healthy people of your age group forever, you are going to do things that will look extreme to most people. It will always be above what the average person deems socially acceptable, normal behaviors.
Yeah.
So if you desire to be a top percentile in the health, wellness, longevity game, you're going to be an outlier in some behavior that you're doing. Therefore, expect to always have this going on. Like you'll always be having to make this choice of like, okay, do I just follow along with what everyone else is doing because that's a little bit easier for me to do and I don't have to like defend my thing and push back and maybe make the relationships feel tense and tight and whatever? Do I have to just adopt this detachment strategy, be like, okay, this is going to be happening forever and I got to just detach? Or do you want to find yourself in a position to be like, no, I hope that my behaviors and my choices will help lead people. And it's not like you're going to suddenly be like, I'm a leader in everything I do and I do it perfectly and I do it well and I'm the best. I'd love to think that about myself, but it's like, no, there's still circumstances where I'm like, you know what? Makes a lot more sense for me to just follow along with what's going on here. Like, and this is the day that I'm going to do it. I'm going to dinner. We're eating out. I'm not going to make one slight adjustment to the menu. I'm going to eat right off the menu. I'm going to eat off my kid's plate. I'm going to just whatever. Like, I'm just going with the flow. I might wake up tomorrow and feel like garbage, you know? Fine. Or I'm going to just play the detachment game in these environments because I just don't want to get into like, I don't want to be like the fitness guy here. Like, oh, like, hey, I see you do that. I'm like, yeah, that's what I do. And then change the subject. Like, oh, he doesn't want to talk about that. It's like, no, I don't want to talk about it, but we'll talk about something else. Like, I'm super engaged in what else you're doing. And then maybe there's a lot of instances where I'm like, someone's like, hey, like, man, you seem to like work out a lot. I'm like, I love working out. Like, it's totally makes me feel great. And like, makes me love doing this. And like, what are you doing for working out? And then they're like, oh, I'm doing this. I'm like, how's that treating you? It's like, I don't know. I have actually not been in a good rhythm. You seem like you got a good, I do. I have a good training rhythm. Like I've been doing this a long time. You know what I love about it is this. And they're like, oh, cool. Like what's your program? And I'm like, that's a situation where somebody called out the fact that I was more jacked than the average person that they see. Like, dang, like, you know, and I get this on the place I get it often is on the golf course. People are like, whoa, Marcus, like you're jacked. Like, what do you work out 10 to 5 hours a day? And I'm like, no, I work out for like, you know, an hour, 90 minutes, like a few times, like 4 times a week. And they're like, oh, you know, that's an opportunity to lead. Or I could just be like, yeah, I'm super into the gym. It's awesome. Hey, so what do you do for work? You know, I can just I can take that route.
Right.
Right. Anyway, the take home point there is if you want to be, and nowadays, like being exceptional, like being a fringe health person isn't like being a top 1%er. It's like making choices like I'm not going to eat the average diet. I'm going to substitute protein on my plate. That alone is going to be fringe. I mean, it's still somewhat fringe.
Yeah.
So if you want to be in that audience, in that group, like expect that some of this is you're going to be faced with this forever. Mm-hmm. And you have kind of options of how you can, you know, you can work with it.
Yeah. Well, I think it is a really good point that doing what everybody else is doing is going to make you like everybody else.
True.
Yeah.
And as much as I'd love to think like the average is going to continue to get better over time, the average is getting worse over time.
Yeah.
You know, and we're in a kind of an isolated fitness bubble of people who are like pushing the envelope of like getting healthier and fitter and biohacking, but it's like you know, the average person is not doing that.
Right.
And so each time you're trying to adopt one of these new behaviors, like you're sort of separating yourself from the herd, and which is going to invite more of this fit shaming concept into your world.
Yeah.
Which another way of thinking about it is just people like identifying the differences between them and you, and it putting them and making them feel uncomfortable, which in turn leads to questions and attention on you that makes you feel uncomfortable. And it's like, now everyone's uncomfortable. And that's how do we overcome that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Cool. I think we nailed it.
Yeah. I'd love to hear people's stories about this.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a great one. I bet most listeners, almost all listeners to this podcast have an experience of this. So
For sure.
send us your story.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll see you all in the next episode.
See ya.